Maryland basketball needs to add Sebastian Wilkins.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you guys for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Maryland basketball needs to add 4-star Sebastian Wilkins. I love the way Buzz Williams has built this Maryland basketball team. I really like where it's at and the players that we have. Coach Buzz Williams seems to be doing a really good job overall of building up a roster that was completely blank. But I've said it from the start, this lineup does not have a lot of oomph. It doesn't have a lot of star power. It doesn't have a lot of guys that you're like, oh, yeah, that guy's going to go get you 25. It doesn't really have a guy that is as talented as like a Derek Queen. Like, we don't have that type of player or a clear star. I think there's a couple guys on the team that you think can hopefully take that next step, but it's a bunch of really good, solid starters, a deep team that you're really excited about. But to me, for the Terps to take another level on this roster, they have to continue to balance out and continue to add guys that feel like really solid pickups for Maryland basketball, guys that can really help us overall. And I love what Buzz has done with this roster. I love where it's at, but I do think there's another step to be taken for Maryland basketball. I do think there's another step point that we can take with this roster. And there's not a ton of guys on the board left. And that's why I think that we need to land this kid, Sebastian Wilkins. And I think that Sebastian Wilkins could really help us down the line. Obviously, he's a 2026, so we wouldn't end up getting him next year, but I just think he's the type of player that could really help the Terps in the long run. And so to give you a little bit about Sebastian Williams and kind of a little bit about him so you guys know a little bit more, he's a 6'8". He's listed as a forward, 6'8", 215 according to 247. He's rated as one of the top players in the 2026 class. This isn't a kid who's like a teetering 4-star, 3-star player. He's ranked as a high-level 4-star, a borderline 5-star type of player for potentially the Terps, and could make a lot of sense for Maryland basketball. And I think he could really be part of what the core of what Maryland basketball is building right now under Coach Buzz Williams. So the interesting part about it was, this is why I talk about how important relationships are for coach to player, even when a kid is potentially looking like he's not going to go your way. It's important to maintain a really solid relationship, not try and give the kid any harsh words if he doesn't choose your school. Through all the recruiting process, you want to keep connected to these kids. You never want to show any disappointment in a kid. You never want to be like he's doing things wrong. You want to stay connected, because this is exactly why it matters. For a kid like Sebastian Wilkins, he was actually really considering Texas A&M, of course, when Coach Buzz Williams was there. So Texas A&M was one of the schools that he really liked. He liked Coach Buzz Williams. He liked the Texas A&M. He liked the program with Coach Buzz Williams. And the fact that Buzz Williams did a really good job recruiting him, building a really solid relationship with him. Now, look, we can get him in the portal, we can get him to flip to Maryland, or not flip. He hadn't committed to Texas A&M yet, but to end up possibly committing to Maryland. So I think it's important for coaches to really honestly keep those types of connections with their players. And it works like a couple different ways. It can work like that with a recruit. It can also work in the portal. It's important to coach people the right way. It's important, if we're talking about the recruiting way, to make sure you recruit guys the right way, because you never know when guys are going to hop in the portal and you're like, oh yeah, I had a great relationship with that kid out of high school. He ended up choosing somewhere else. So I did want to add that in. But that's a little bit of backstory about Sebastian Wilkins. He currently goes to Brewster Academy, which is a really top-end type of high school who produces a lot of really good commitments. And so the Sebastian Wilkins thing is really interesting. And he's supposed to make his commitment in the next couple of days. So that will also be a really big thing. That's why I'm talking about him today. And so the biggest part of this is kind of the schools that it's down to. We're down to 2 schools for Sebastian Wilkins. It is between Maryland and Duke. So we're competing with the blue blood here. We're competing with a top-end Duke squad to get Sebastian Wilkins, and that's the way you want it to be. You want to be competing against schools like Duke, schools like Carolina, schools like Arizona, like all the top blue blood teams like a Michigan State in the Big Ten. If you're competing against those teams for a kid, and Duke really likes this kid, you're doing something probably right. And I love that we're in it with Duke. I think that's a really big part of Maryland recruiting and what we're looking at. Buzz Williams looks to be getting things done. And I think it's going to be a little bit different than what we've been used to. I don't think it's quite going to be, the DMV, like Buzz Williams is really, really focused on the DMV. It might actually end up being more of a national thing for Buzz Williams, which I do think can extend your ceiling if you can dive into the DMV, obviously. But Buzz Williams, if he can also dive into the entire country, I think the ceiling of what Maryland basketball can be actually is a lot higher than it was before. And I do think that is something that is really important for the Terps to be able to do. So I think that's actually really interesting for Buzz Williams, and the fact that he's getting guys that aren't just DMV guys, like Darius Adams, our 5-star commit that we'll see on the team next year, should play a ton. He's a guy that isn't a DMV kid, and neither is Sebastian Wilkins. So we're getting guys outside of the DMV, which is honestly really awesome to be able to see. But I think it's a kind of guy that we need. You can't miss out on very many of these guys and have the expectations of what Maryland basketball wants to do. You can't just be missing out on guys like this if you want to end up being as good of a team as we want Maryland to be. And Buzz Williams wants to make Final Fours. He wants to make Elite Eights. He wants to make the tournament. And if we want to be like that, we're going to have to beat out a team like Duke for Sebastian Wilkins. We're going to have to beat out teams like this because that's just what happens. That's the kind of quality of players you need to be able to win and to be able to do things in the Big Ten and be able to do things across all college football or college basketball and college football for that matter. But I didn't think I realized how good of a recruiter Buzz Williams would be instantly. Like, he's done a really top-end job, in my opinion, in being in discussions. Like, getting Darius Adams from UConn, like, that's no easy thing. Getting Sebastian Wilkins, a 6'8", 215 player, that's no slight at all. So I do think that Buzz Williams is honestly looking like a better recruiter than Willard. And I thought that was kind of Willard's strength through his couple of years at College Park. We talked about Willard's 2023 class, even though it didn't shape out the way we wanted it to in terms of the ranking. Jamie Kaiser, Deshaun Harris-Smith were both high-end blue chip type of prospects. And then obviously you landed Derek Queen. So I honestly thought he was a really solid recruiter. I thought that Kevin Willard did a good job in portal as well last year, especially with Rodney Rice, Selton McHale. Like, I thought those were a really good job. But now I'm looking at Coach Buzz Williams, and I'm like, is he better? Is he a better recruiter? Is he better at doing some of these things? So I do think that's an interesting part of it. But a quick scouting report on Sebastian Wilkins. So Wilkins, it says Adam Finkelstein said Wilkins came up the ranks as a forward who could put the ball on the floor at a young age. Since then, he's developed his shooting range and extended his skill set away from the basket while simultaneously making real gains defensively. He's evolved into a modern-day combo forward who can play and defend multiple positions, which is exactly what we want. So it does sound like he's got some different things offensively going. It says he still needs to get consistent from long range, He made 40% of his threes in 2024, but dipped down to 30% as a senior at Brewster. So he's definitely a guy that can shoot the rock a little bit. And at 6'8", 6'9", playing a forward position, that's definitely what you want from a kid in Sebastian Wilkins. So I do think he sounds like an interesting player. He could be a really solid pickup for us, but he does make his decision over the next couple of days. And so it does sound like it is between Maryland and Duke. But I'm going to go ahead and say Maryland's going to win this one. It does look like he's leaning Maryland. It does look like Maryland's the favorite, so slightly. It could go either way for sure, but it does sound like Maryland's the favorite. It says on 3, Maryland's at 39.6% prediction, while Duke's at 34.7, and 247 shows Maryland as hot, while everyone else is cool. So we'll see if the recruiting momentum continues. We'll see if Buzz Williams continues to do his thing. But hey, 6'8", 6'9" guys that can do a little bit of everything, that can defend all positions, we're never going to say no to those types of guys. So we'll see exactly what happens with that. Maryland got ranked having some of the best new additions in the Big Ten. We'll talk about that next. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's game-winning shots or breakout player, there's never been time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. You can choose over, under on so many different props on FanDuel. There's so many different things you can bet on. The MLB, if you want to do that, you can do that. It's in full swing. If you want to bet on the NBA playoffs, the Knicks Pacers series, or the Timberwolves OKC, you guys can do that. If you want to choose over or under on Shea Gillis points, you can do that, or Anthony Edwards, whatever, you can do that on FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. So I'm really excited for this segment. I was looking at an article that actually ranked Maryland as the top 25 in terms of new coming talent. So basically what that means is that Maryland is a top 25 team in terms of bring in new talent, not just in the transfer portal, but also in terms of the freshmen. So I think that is a really interesting thing. And I kind of want to go over the article a bit, but I want to give kind of my overall type of thoughts on what I think in terms of the incoming new talent, the guys that are replacing some of the old talent, and what those kind of are, what my thoughts are overall about some of that stuff. And so they said that in the article, the top impact recruits on Maryland that could have a really strong impact on Maryland's strong 2025 class is obviously quarterback Malik Washington. I think he could end up being the guy. I think he could end up being the starter. I think he could end up being the head for the Terps and end up being a really high-end player for Maryland football and do some really good things for Maryland football overall. I do really like Malik Washington and what he brings. I think he can transform this Maryland football team. We'll see exactly what happens. Obviously, that's probably your top incoming guy in terms of he's our top-rated recruit, as well as he's our top in terms of positional. Obviously, if you're going to bring in a freshman quarterback that might end up starting, that could end up being a really big new coming talent. So I do think that makes a lot of sense when you look at Malik Washington. He probably holds a lot of weight in this class because there's just no one that can make quite the impact that the quarterback can. And then you move off of that and you get a guy like Jalen Gilchrist on the offensive line that potentially could play for us this year. He could be good enough to play for us this year. He could be good enough to make an impact this year. He's another guy that potentially we look at as a guy that can make an impact for Maryland football. I think Jalen Gilchrist definitely is that type of player. So he's another guy that could do some things for Maryland football overall in the offensive line, which I always say Maryland hasn't been good, but the 4-star recruit who's rated really highly had Georgia, had big-time offers. And then Bryce Jenkins at defensive tackle is a big body that can slide into that rotation. A lot of bodies, but those are top impact guys in terms of the freshmen. I think all those guys end up really helping us. But that doesn't even include guys like Messiah Delhomme, who could end up being a starting safety this year for Maryland football. I haven't talked about Messiah Delhomme a ton, but in terms of a new addition, he might be one of the higher impact guys right away. I don't think our safety room is necessarily deep. There's not like a ton of guys that you feel awesome about. I think we feel good about one player only. I think we feel good about Jalen Husky and the impact that he can make for the Terps. But yeah, outside of that at the safety spot, I don't feel like there's 100 of names there that you're like, yeah, that guy's a starter for us. I think Messiah Delhomme could easily slide in terms of new production and be a guy that plays for the Terps early on. And then Zymir Smith, still don't really know what we're doing with him. And the article says wide receiver Zymir Smith. So I don't know what Zymir Smith ends up doing, but if he is a receiver, we know we need guys that can separate, guys that can get open, guys that can be explosive. And obviously we know Zymir Smith does do a lot of that stuff. So I think that could be interesting as well. So we also were obviously hit hard though on the transfer. We also hit the transfer portal pretty hard and a bunch of guys that can definitely help us in terms of new coming talent. Jaleel Farouk is the guy I'm really excited for at the receiver position to see if he can come back from his injury at Oklahoma last year and get back to how he was a couple of years ago. And so he was a really solid receiver in the Big 12, I guess Oklahoma was in at that time. And I want to see what Jaleel Farouk can do. And then Dorian Fleming, I think him at the tight end spot, I thought he looked good in the spring game. He's definitely a guy that could end up being one of our leading reception guys. I think he's a really solid type of tight end threat. I think getting him out of the portal, I definitely think from Georgia State definitely helps Maryland football. So we'll see how he looks on the team. But I think in terms of tight end, that's a really big pickup. And obviously Justin Martin at the quarterback position. I know I haven't talked about him a ton because the spring game didn't look great, but he's another guy that potentially could make an impact for the Terps. So that's something else that we definitely feel good about for Maryland football. So we'll see what ends up happening with Justin Martin, but that's another impact guy overall. And then there's a bunch of other guys as well. A couple guys in the secondary like Jamar Glasker, Dante Joyner, definitely guys you feel pretty good about. And there's a bunch of other players as well. Defensive lineman Joel Starlings. Like there's a lot of different players who actually, when you really look at it, this team is going to be highly reliant on newcomers. That's just the way it is. There's a lot of guys at different position groups. We're going to be really highly reliant on newcomers. And I think it makes sense that we have a top 25 newcoming class with the amount of guys that left that decided to go different places. I do think it's big that we have some new talent, that we have some new guys that can really step in and help the Terps. I do think we have that, and I do think that'll help Maryland football overall. So I do like a lot of the talent that we actually ended up bringing in. I think being as a 25th rated newcoming class, I think a lot of it's talent that hasn't quite gotten proven yet, but I do think they can end up making a way. So I really do like that article, and I thought it was interesting because they had us rated as I think it was a pretty top-end recruiting class in the Big Ten. I think number 8 in terms of the Big Ten recruiting class, according to 247 in the Big Ten, which is pretty solid for the Terps, and then 11th best transfer class, and then 36th ranked nationally in terms of our transfer class, and 25th ranked nationally. So we did end up with the top 25 class. So that is something that is interesting for Maryland football. We're going to talk about Emanuel Ihanacho, the 5-star prospect. Is Maryland still on that list? What's the deal with that? We'll talk about that next. Excuse me. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online, shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery, and now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever, and you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. So I was reading an article about Emanuel Ihanacho, and I want to talk about this. I think for the longest time, Maryland football, and me included, thought Emanuel Ihanacho was a priority recruit. Anytime you get this type of player that lives in the DMV with his size, with honestly his freakish talent at his position group on the offensive line, goes to Georgetown Prep right in DC, like 20 minutes, 30 minutes away from the DMV. Anytime you get a guy like this, you got to go hard for him. And he's dropped a little bit in the 247 ratings. He's now 22 ranked nationally, second interior offensive line, second in Maryland. So nothing crazy. He's composite. So a lot of other websites still have him as a top 10 type of guy. He's announcing his commitment on August 5th. And it sounds like Maryland's no longer in the race. Maryland actually was in the race for a while, it sounded like, but it sounds like things have started to cool down for Emanuel Ihanacho. But what I was saying before is whenever you got a guy like this in the DMV, a 5-star offensive lineman that's 6'5", 1 billion pounds, you got to do everything to go after a guy like that because clearly you have a home court advantage. You got to be able to play with that a little bit. We were able to do it with Zion Ely, and I was like, the 2025 class might be in trouble. This 2026 class might be actually better than the 2025 class. But now I'm like, okay, I don't know if that's going to end up happening because Emanuel Ihanacho looks like he is going to end up going somewhere else. And Maryland was crystal ball to get him for a little bit, and I feel good about it. I was like, okay, Maryland's in this thing. We got Zion Ely. There's some factor behind the scenes. A lot of stuff goes behind the scenes in today's world with the NIL and all these different moving parts and all these deals that are happening in the transfer portal. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, a lot of stuff that I don't even know if it's legal. And so I thought Maryland was moving stuff around, doing some different things to be able to get Emanuel Ihanacho, and to be able to get guys like Zion Ely, Emanuel Ihanacho. But it now looks like those guys are it looks like Emanuel Ihanacho isn't going to end up a Terp. It does end like he's going to go somewhere else between it sounds like Oregon's really leading, but it sounds like Penn State, Oregon, and LSU are all up there. It is a little bit disappointing because I thought getting a guy like this could really help Maryland football, but I also understand it. I mean, I understand it for Emanuel Ihanacho. It sounds like he's a little bit of a 360 on Maryland. Or 180, I should say, 360. I guess he would come back to us. Hopefully, it ends up being a 360. Sounds like he did a little bit of a 180, and I can get it. We haven't shown a lot of proof on the offensive line. It's not like a receiver prospect or like a DB prospect. So I get it. It makes sense. But at the same time, I was really hoping we can maybe pull that through because I've talked about it. The offensive line is so important for the Terps, and getting a guy like Emanuel Ihanacho on the line, I thought could help Maryland a ton. Well, that's all we have for today. Thank you guys for listening to Locked On Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you guys for listening to Locked On Terps.